Picture it. A future nurse, annoyed by the sunlight filtering through the blinds, roused awake at 2 p.m., body half hanging off the sofa, cigarette butts and wine bottles decorating the room, Cheeto crumbs decorating their face. Yes, folks, Florence Nightingale's journey was a rocky one. I'm kidding. That was me 14 years ago. And I'm extremely fortunate that my drinking years didn't take place during this live streaming era. But believe me, it would have been one hell of a show. That guy, that hopeless alcoholic, could never have imagined a day like today where he'd be speaking with you on the topics of health and wellness. I mean, let's face it, my idea of wellness involved choosing Diet Coke over regular as a liquor mixer. FYI, it's very important to decrease your sugar intake while engaged in deep philosophical conversations with a floor lamp. Clearly, back then, I wasn't making good choices with regards to my own well-being. And any notion that my life could be any different seemed light years away. Many alcoholics only begin to wake up to the notion of a better life after experiencing what's known as rock bottom, which may involve some great tragedy, such as going to prison or even killing someone during an episode of drinking and driving. I miraculously did not experience anything quite that tragic, but I did have a gnawing gut feeling that I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. My journey toward increased health and wellness began with a New Year's resolution. I called it 52 Weeks of New. The idea was that for each week during that coming year, I would experience something new, something I'd never tried before. And I wasn't going to allow fear to stop me. Well, I can't recall exactly how it came about, but yoga made it to that list. So I signed up for a Yoga 101 workshop. And by the time I walked out of that class, I was addicted to something new. Something I hadn't experienced in quite a while, a sense of inner peace. It was a single tiny step in the direction toward healing both my body and my mind, but the journey had begun, and I knew then that I could, in fact, make better choices and slowly but surely begin to turn my life around. I stand before you today celebrating 13 years of sobriety. Thank you. Along the way, I gained certification as a yoga and meditation teacher, and eventually I became a registered nurse. As a master's prepared nurse, I like to think I know a thing or two about health and wellness, and my goal here today is to share a message of hope and inspiration that our health is truly our greatest wealth. Many of the choices we make each day, whether it's what we choose to eat, how we choose to move, or how we choose to handle life's curveballs, can make the difference between mental and physical poverty or a life of plentiful peace. Let's touch on a couple of killers. A little lighthearted conversation to really get you loosened up. Heart disease and diabetes remain two of the leading causes of death in the U.S., and many of the choices we make each day can either bring about the onset of these killers or help squash them in their tracks. Let's take a look at some stats from the CDC, because that's what you all came to hear about today, right? A bunch of numbers. Heart disease results in nearly 900,000 deaths annually. That's approximately 1/3 of all U.S. deaths. There are around 30 million people in the U.S. diagnosed with diabetes, and approximately 84 million are considered pre-diabetic, 90% of whom don't even know they're on the road to an actual diagnosis. These are examples of chronic disease conditions, and the annual healthcare costs associated with them are astronomical. Chronic disease contributes to the rising cost of healthcare, but through preventative measures, we could dramatically reduce those costs and help lower insurance premiums for everyone. That last statement, by the way, is in no way intended to make scapegoats of anyone who suffers from a chronic condition. I simply wish to point out that, as the old adage goes, an ounce of prevention is truly worth a pound of cure. Over the years, we've gotten quite good at managing these conditions through continued scientific research, advanced medication regimens, and new and improved surgical procedures. Medical professionals are able to detect and diagnose these things much earlier nowadays, leading to better disease management as well as increased quality and length of life. But once we've got diabetes, for instance, much like alcoholism, we've got it for life. There's no turning back, and it will be with us until our last breath. So what if we collectively choose on a mass scale to not wait for the healthcare system to save us? What if we consciously decide to make one small change in our behavior, one small commitment to asking ourselves, why do I do the things I do? What drives the choices we make each day, and how can we get to the root of what's ailing us? This is as much a journey of self-discovery as it is of increased health. So there are the obvious recommendations geared toward disease prevention and enhanced well-being, the stuff we've heard about since year one. But don't get me wrong, these recommendations are indeed sound advice. Eating well, particularly moving toward a more plant-based diet full of fiber, low in cholesterol, and high on the nutrient density scale. Of course, this can be a real challenge for low-income families living on a tight budget, and those who reside in areas called food deserts where the closest thing to a supermarket is a convenience store. So this is why it's important to help out with initiatives in our community, such as development of community gardens, which provide fresh produce for everyone in the community, and supporting your local food pantry. Incidentally, if you do donate food, and if you can afford to, please donate the good stuff. Donate the organics, the low-processed foods, the whole grain items, and the gluten-free foods for those who need them. Then take it a step further. For instance, if you love to cook, work with the food pantry staff to hold a cooking class for folks so they can learn how to prepare some healthy dishes from food items that may be unfamiliar. Being physically active. We should all be moving more and getting in at least 30 minutes of physical activity 5 times per week. We know that even a regular leisurely walk around the neighborhood or local park holds many health benefits, such as improved cardiovascular health, gastrointestinal motility. Yes, walking can help keep you regular in your bowel movements, which is actually a very important component of overall health and wellness. And physical activity helps to alleviate mild depression and anxiety. So from your brain to your butt and beyond, there's a lot to be said for a good old-fashioned stroll. Avoiding tobacco. Big no-brainer. Unless you're a 1950s TV doctor who loves to smoke around oxygen tanks. You know, it's just disturbing to see the little kid in this ad, and you just know little Johnny's parents used to send him to the corner store to buy their smokes. Moderate alcohol consumption. Moderation equals less taxing for the liver. Yeah, well, that was never my personal strong point, but you get the idea. Ethanol, the active ingredient in an alcoholic beverage, is in fact a poison. Our bodies can compensate for the introduction of moderate amounts of toxic substances from time to time. But even a single night of heavy drinking can result in a condition known as hepatic steatosis, or fatty liver, which impedes liver function. Now, our liver itself is the primary filter through which we catabolize or break down pretty much anything and everything we ingest. When we're in our 20s, the liver can more easily bounce back from a heavy night of partying. But if you have fond memories of when MTV actually used to play music videos, your liver will want to slap you silly for impersonating a beer keg. So practicing these healthy habits does not 100% guarantee that we won't develop a chronic condition such as heart disease or diabetes. And you're like, well, if that's the case, bring on the lazy boy, the booze, and pass me that pan of double chocolate brownies because I'm going to town. But, big but, which you'll have, by the way, if you do those things, but I digress. But the more we implement these healthy habits into our everyday life, the more likely we are to seek ways to manage it more effectively. So there's one other recommendation, which if you take away nothing else from this talk, I sincerely hope it's this point. We have got to start managing our stress more effectively. Not all stress is bad. There's a form of stress called eustress, which basically breaks down to EU, meaning good, and stress, meaning stress. So basically good stress. This is the type of stress that keeps us functioning as productive members of society. For instance, it's eustress that prompts us to get up out of bed every day and go to class or to work so that we can pass that course or pay those bills. Then there's the bad stress. We call this distress. When we're distressed, there are, of course, mental and emotional aspects involved, but there are also physiologic effects which take place, particularly over the long term. So here's a quick anatomy and physiology lesson. You're like, damn it, what's this guy doing now? So I got to eat carrots and learn about my innards? But I assure you it will be quick and painless. That said, sitting atop our kidneys are glands known as the adrenal glands. AD meaning atop and renal meaning kidney. So the adrenal glands are glands that sit atop our kidneys. The adrenal glands produce stress hormones such as epinephrine, also known as adrenaline, and cortisol. Adrenaline kicks in when we're faced with an immediate threat as it travels through neural pathways within our nervous system. Cortisol, however, works a little more slowly and travels through the bloodstream. From an evolutionary perspective, cortisol is a good thing, because it helps the body to hold on to fat stores longer when we're faced with famine and starvation. Well, most of us here today aren't faced with those conditions, as evidenced by my love handles, which used to be cake. But we still produce a lot of cortisol as a result of emotional distress. We've got mortgages and medical bills and student loans and dysfunctional families and divorce and peer pressure, and they forgot my sauce at the drive-thru window. Anyway, cortisol is a fat-soluble substance, which means it has the ability to penetrate the walls of our body's cells. As such, overexposure to cortisol through high stress levels can eventually begin to damage the lining of our arteries. Looking at it through a high-powered microscope, this damage appears as little jagged and frayed tissue, which over time can begin to collect and aggregate fatty components of the blood, leading to the formation of arterial plaques and blockages. Now, does stress in and of itself cause arterial blockage? No. There are a number of other lifestyle factors involved, namely a lack of the aforementioned recommendations. But unmanaged stress over the long term can contribute to such things, and we should all be aware of that. The more we understand how stress can affect our health, the more likely we are to seek ways to manage it more effectively. Now, as a nurse and yoga teacher, I highly recommend yoga, meditation, and breathing exercises to help calm us down. But each of you can explore what works best and resonates best for you as an individual. But whatever you choose, please, please, please commit to allowing yourself at least 1 hour per day to calm down, decompress, and relax. A nice leisurely walk, reading a good book, taking a nap, which at this point some of you may already be doing, or engaging a favorite hobby. It's all good stuff. Now, let's discuss active participation in our own well-being. Key here is personal responsibility, something which is sometimes lacking in our society because we've conditioned ourselves to believe that there's always someone else to blame for anything unpleasant life throws our way. Incidentally, I blame each of you for my aforementioned love handles. So there, I expect numerous apologies and perhaps even a few checks after I leave this stage. We are responsible for our own well-being. Say it with me. We are responsible for our own well-being. One more time, a little louder. We are responsible for our own well-being. So what does that really mean? That statement, that declaration, that mantra points to the fact that we play the central role in our healthcare team. Within the healthcare arena itself, many organizations have adopted the concept of patient-centered care, which places the patient smack dab in the center of everything and strives to include the patient in decision-making processes throughout each stage of patient care. We can and should adopt that concept and apply it to our everyday lives. Our team of doctors and nurses and other healthcare providers can and do work diligently to help bring us back from a given illness and to prevent an illness from coming on in the first place. But we're the primary players. We're the ones who need to get up each and every day and consciously decide that we're going to work toward letting go of unhealthy habits and adopting new life-affirming ones. Our providers can impart advice to us until they're blue in the face. But until we make the decision to implement that advice, none of it amounts to a hill of beans, which, as the old saying goes, are good for your heart. I won't say the other part. We have to get hyped and excited at the thought of empowering ourselves toward a life that holds greater meaning and potential. Our health is truly our greatest wealth because increased and sustained health and wellness allow us to affect positive change in our lives and the lives of others. Each and every time we choose even a brief walk over vegetating on the couch, when we choose to volunteer in our communities as opposed to sitting around griping about the state of things, or when we choose a big green salad over those chili cheese fries. I'm sorry, I got a little distracted there. We actually make the world a better place while simultaneously taking charge of our own destinies. So I'll finish up here with a bit of homework for each of you. Our brains are plastic. Not like lawn furniture or those little sporks you get in a cafeteria. No. Plastic means that we have the ability to reshape or rewire our brains through the choices we make each day and through the introduction of new daily habits. As human beings, we're naturally creatures of habit. And we tend to repeat the same patterns over and over each day as we strive to develop a sense of routine to our daily lives. We gear our neurons, our brain cells, towards specific neural pathways which offer a sense of psychological comfort through familiar daily patterns. Now, the problem is choosing the chili cheese fries over the salad becomes a more difficult cycle to break the longer we engage that particular habit. But it can be done. So here's your homework. before you do whatever it is you do, ask yourself this one simple question. Why am I doing what I'm doing? That question is a powerful key to positive change. Asking ourselves that question allows us to take a step back, to take a deeper look into our daily habits, and to see with greater clarity what's actually motivating our actions. The driving force that guides us either towards holistic wellness or towards something more harmful. Asking ourselves that question, we may very well discover that we eat, for instance, to console ourselves from an emotional upset. Or perhaps we smoke because we never really dealt with a childhood trauma. It's never easy to delve into these things, but it's that investigation into ourselves, that questioning of our condition, that's a starting point towards healing both our bodies and our minds. Just remember, if that alcoholic future nurse standing before you today can be standing before you today, delivering this message of hope, then you too can begin your own journey towards increased health and wellness, right here, right now, and with the best of positive intentions, because our health is truly our greatest wealth. Thank you very much.